Alright, so I'm going to be replacing the upper control arm on this today. The ball joint has play in it, so it's time to replace it. Alright, so the first thing to do is pop the hood and jack up the whatever side that you're working on. So I'm about to jack this up, and then we're going to take the wheel off and go from there. Alright, I got the front wheel jacked up now. And if you don't have an impact, then it's a good idea to loosen these before you jack it up. But the ball joint is back here, and how you check that is you put your hand on the top and the bottom of the wheel with it jacked up, and then you're going to try to wiggle it. It's not supposed to move at all. Alright, now that the wheel is off, this is the upper control arm here. There's a bolt and a nut that goes through each side here. It has this little bracket on it, so we can't spin here. We're just gonna have to use something to hold this in place. Well, this should hold it in place, but sometimes it's too tight and it just bends that metal. And right here is usually a 19mm. Alright, so the impact gun won't fit in here unless you got a small one or you take the brakes apart. But I don't really want to take that apart, so I'm just gonna take a 1/2-inch ratchet. There we go. And if you're lucky, it'll spin all the way out. Sometimes they just spin the whole stud of the outer ball joint there. But usually after they've been on a while, they get stuck and you can get the nut off. Alright, now the proper way to get that to come free is to hit it with a hammer there. But this is getting replaced, so it doesn't really matter if we damage that. We'll see what happens. Alright. As you can see, that's really loose. And there was play in there, so that's bad. I guess the boot's torn too. No lubrication in there. They come with barely any grease for some reason. When the arm comes down, it's pulling on the brake line. So I'm going to take a 10mm and just pull that bracket off so it doesn't damage the line or anything. Alright, so the next step is up here. The first nut to take off is that one right in the middle that you can see by that wire. That's the easy one to get to. And the hard one to get to is in there. You could try to reach and get it with all this on, but that would take too long, and we're better off just taking off this bar here. So there's gonna be a bolt in each side here. That's just held on like that because the bolt broke off inside a while ago. I didn't really want to deal with it, but it's secure anyway. And then there's 2 bolts over there. They're 13mm, and you're gonna want to pop these clips off too. And underneath, this is clipped up here. And after you undo that stuff, you should be able to slide this bar out. Alright, so after you undo that stuff, You can twist it back like this. And lift it off. There's a little wire clip in here. Pull it out and lift it away. Alright, and now you can see down in here more. You should be able to see the nut there now. Now I'm just gonna put a socket that fits that nut on my wrench and see if I can get it on there. Alright, I was able to get my ratchet on it barely, but it's moving. And you can just watch in this side too to make sure that's not moving. And that hasn't been moving, so that means the nut's coming off. Just gonna take that nut off and then we'll move on to the next one. Alright, so I got the nut out, and the strut here is going to be in the way to try to get the stud out, so we're just going to undo these three right here. They look like they should be a 13. Alright, now I'm going to undo this bolt here because it's holding the strut in place. We need to move the strut so we can get to the bolts behind this. Alright, this is an 18mm. So the weight of this is on the bolt, so I just need to take my other hand and lift this up and then pull the bolt out. So I left the sway bar link on, so this isn't going to completely come out. So all you need to do is take it, shift it over here, and then you'll have room up here to take the bolts out, because you can move. So that's all you need to do. You don't need to worry about taking the sway bar links off unless they're damaged. So now all that's left is this nut over here. I'm gonna get a 19mm on it, take that nut off. Alright, to get this one you'll need some sort of wrench, unless you have a low profile socket. Make sure you don't drop the nuts because you don't want them to fall. Alright, so both nuts are out. So all that's left is to slide this out. And then grab this, wiggle it out. Alright. Alright, so I got the new arm here. Just gonna take this plastic piece off that's protecting the boot, and I'll lift it up and slide it in place here. Might not be easy, but I'm gonna need two hands for this, so you just sit it in place. Alright, so I got this in. So what you're supposed to do when you're putting the nuts on these is you're supposed to put them secure but still kind of loose. Put it all the way on, but you don't want it to be torqued down yet, because you don't want to torque these nuts under the hood until you have the weight of the suspension on it. So you put this back together and you put the suspension back together and put the wheel on it, and then you lower it to the ground, and once it's on the ground then you go under the hood here and you torque these nuts down. That way you don't mess up your bushings early, because They're supposed to be in a certain position. Alright, so now I'm gonna lift the strut back into place, and I'm gonna put the top nuts in the bottom bolt here, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so I have that bolted back in there, and I put these nuts back on. You want to be careful with these ones. You don't want to put them over tight because they're only smallers. They're only 13 millimeters, so they don't need that much torque. Alright, so what I'm gonna do next is lift up the knuckle here, and then I'm gonna take the upper control arm, pull it down, and put the stud in the hole and put the nut on it. Alright, so I put the nut back on there, it's tight. And also don't forget to put the bracket back on and tighten that. I just sprayed some undercoat in here because where I live, stuff will rust very quickly if you don't keep it undercoated. So now I'm just gonna put the wheel back on, and then we're gonna lower it to the ground. Alright, so now you put the wheel on and tighten the lug nuts on, not too tight. And you can lower it to the ground and torque it to 100 foot-pounds. You gotta make sure these are torqued good. You don't want the wheel to fall off. Alright, so after the wheel's on the ground and the wheels are torqued, then we're gonna come back here and tighten these nuts all the way. Alright, so I got the nuts on both sides tightened, and I installed the strut bar again. Make sure you don't forget to clip these in the bottom. That clips there. And over here. This one clips in there. Yeah, so it's all done now.